Or good afternoon.
How are you?
How are you all?
Great.
Still carrying on the St. Patrick's Day tradition, Mr. DeWalt?
That was a good parade. We
That's
had
a
a
good
lot of
color.
kids on that float. That was
A lot of kids.
I saw the pictures
That
of
was
y'all.
awesome.
It looked fun.
Two sitting beside me were freezing to death.
yeah, they were.
Oh, yeah.
And
At least it didn't rain.
boy.
That's a good thing. Mo violated the insurance policy 3 times jumping on
One.
the boat.
One.
Please be careful. Please be careful. Please be careful. But it worked out just fine. Just fine.
Council run over by float.
Guess we actually had a quorum on the float. I'm not sure. Is that what we had?
Runaways float.
We had a
Roll with
quorum- we
it.
had a quorum.
What was that?
Everybody says fully open, public. So y'all are good.
The, Madam Clerk?
Here. Yes. Here.
Here.
Here. So soon they forget you.
Can I leave? Can I leave then?
Here. All right, thank you. All right, Rev, you mind blessing us with the word, brother? Yes.
Eternal God, for all that you've done for us today, for the blessings you've bestowed upon each of us as individual members and families alike. We ask that you might continue to shower your blessings upon us. Allow us to sense and to feel your nearness as we collaborate and discuss the policies and the workings of our city. Allow our city to feel the necessary warmth that is necessary for building and for sustaining. We ask it in your name. Amen.
Yes, sir. We will begin with our city council discussion. Reverend McDowell, before your item, I did want to ask council, just as a housekeeping matter, and for our sweet clerk, who always reminds me of springtime and people's activities with family coming up for spring break and Easter. Do you all want to revisit April's calendar at all? I think we had a few questions about it. And then I also recall, and Ralph reminded me that some members of council, in their recent travels to Washington, reminded him of wanting to make a trip or do a visit as a council to visit some of the delegation members. So I just wanted to raise that. Right now, you all are meeting on April 16th for a work session and a council meeting. And we wanted to propose, I thought there were some scheduling challenges, so we wanted to get that straight real quick if possible.
Yeah, 16th, I thought we'd already addressed that. 16th didn't work for me.
Okay.
It's going to spring break. Yeah, we did work.
Well, that means we can get some stuff done.
So is April 2nd okay for everybody? Which would have been the normal.
That's what I had down, April 2nd, actually.
I don't know if school districts' calendars changed, we thought, this year or something. I'm not sure how we got a little off track, but
Second works fine.
April 2nd, is that good for everyone?
Yeah, and what's the second meeting?
Right now, we only had April 16th listed, so that was the other reason why we were trying to double check with everybody, unless you.
Second and the 9th don't work for me because I've already planned since we already had a calendar.
Okay, so you're not available the 2nd, okay.
I might can switch it around. I'll have to try, but I'm supposed to travel. I think I'm in Orlando. I can't let you know today. but-
What's the third date? I mean, third Tuesday, what would be the normal?
This is 16th.
16 is spring break.
Yeah, that's what,
I can do 16 though. Although, but you can.
I'll be gone for spring break.
What about the 23rd?
23rd.
It what?
There's
Does not work.
The 30th. Unless we do
We'll
a
just
9.
plan on the
Let's-
2nd, and I'll just try to see if I can move my meeting.
Let's just canvass for a second meeting that month. I don't think it has to be a Tuesday unless we just decide we want to make it. Okay?
We're just trying to get one meeting.
Huh?
Right now, we're just trying to
Oh,
get one meeting.
I thought we had the second. The second? Are you?
Well, I think Mr.
okay, you can do
Rickman.
the second?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, y'all go ahead and just plan it. If I'm not here, I'm not here. It is
participate remotely.
Well, I can't really participate remotely if you're working.
You been working in the evening?
Huh?
Man, he
Well,
works
it's the
all
afternoon sessions when all the work gets
Work
done.
session, yeah.
And the night, is one better than the other? do you
Now,
think?
I'm out the night.
Okay.
I'm out. I could do the 16th, but that's what I plan. But y'all just plan on the 2nd. I'll see if I can switch something around. Maybe I can fly in and fly out.
And then, do y'all want to talk about it? We can send a few dates to you regarding a Washington trip. Is that something you're still interested in doing? Whether it's April or May?
Well, I guess what are we going for?
Got it.
That would.
Yeah, we got a
would
plan
be
for that.
something, you could talk about, depending. if
Clint's got a
nothing's
plan.
happened by then.
What do
have
we
some
need from them?
alternates, but-
$100 million.
No, we don't. We don't need 100.
Want us to send you, get
Well,
with
if
Ralph?
we've got a good, solid agenda, fine, but if not,
I wouldn't go. I'm not.
Just, I guess, send some dates. We had talked about it, and so Sam and I mentioned it to Ralph when we were in DC, because that's when everybody else was going for our meetings, and it was just Sam and I, so we didn't do any meetings, but we reminded him that when he was here making the briefing, we made a comment that we as a council should go up at a time different than NLC so that we could have a meeting with our congressional delegation. And a couple things that Ralph mentioned to us, we were talking, new market tax credits expire this year. So that was one of the things that he had mentioned, that, you know, if that was on our horizon, we may want to talk with them. He thinks there is a willingness to extend that, but we may want to talk to our delegation about that. And then, of course, just opportunity zones, just making sure that, yes, particularly Senator Scott knows that, you know, we're thankful for his leadership on that, and that we would like to make sure we get some projects.
So you talking about a day trip? First flight out, first flight back?
Okay, we'll float some dates with him and then try to help coordinate y'all's schedules. Thank you so much. Missy, you feel comfortable with that one meeting in April, if that's where, budget-wise? Yeah, we'll know better about that, I guess. We'll let y'all know if we feel like we need to schedule another second meeting in April also. I know you like to do that excuse me, regardless, but,
Maybe we need to do it other than
other than a Tuesday, okay. All right, good? Not eight, they can't do it April 2nd. I think you did. All right, thank you.
You guys, we have I would say he's shadowing me, but he's shadowing all of us today. We have our young superstar, Blake Gibbons, and who's everywhere all the time. He's a really bright young man, and happy to have him spend some time with City Council today.
Where's he from?
Welcome.
Here, student Irma, and he really is a man about town. A lot of great things. He's probably become our chief advocate for mobility and bikeability and
You're Irma Yellow Jacket?
Unless you live on Fair.
Spring Valley.
Oh,
Spring Hill, I'm sorry. Spring Hill.
Okay. That's okay, too.
That's okay.
I graduated from Irma High School in 1992. Yeah, okay. Might know it.
Lisa? Yeah, it's not Lisa.
Oh, okay. Well, we have a wonderful.
Maybe you ought to take him out to Fair Road, talk about bike paths or something.
Man, go ahead, man, go ahead.
And so we fall into the civility discussion.
Right.
Perfect
segue.
Put that on perfect segue into civility
on there.
discussion.
I wouldn't send that young man out there.
I wouldn't send me out there.
You wanna go?
Send me
Been there, done that.
Hey, send me to Greenview, man, Mr. Green. Have a good
All right.
Nobody under 30 allowed.
Now of the Voluntary Code of Civil Public Discourse and Pledge of Professional Conduct, the Honorable Edward H. McDowell Jr.
Yes, ma'am. You just say yeah. I think it's important as we discuss this document a month ago. Okay, a month ago, we wanted to make sure and ensure that all of the things that we discussed initially were included in this. Now, we did not make any changes to it. I understand that there are some, if we're going to talk about this, let's talk about it in terms of however we may want to tweak this document. And if we're ready for it to push forward, we would certainly want to entertain that conversation. So the document is before you.
Why are there only 4 signatures on it?
Brian wasn't here, and I don't remember who the third person would have been.
What's that?
Leona.
Leona?
Leona.
He was asking why I was on the 4. I think Brian, I don't think Brian was here on this day, but, Mr. Mayor?
Please, Mr. Vine.
It's kind of 2 things. One, I mean, I think certainly it's good. I would say, when we did this, there was a lot going on regarding tensions and just kind of respect. And so it was needed at the time. I do agree with Councilman McDowell. I think it's a little vague if we want to address certain things that might be of concern, you may want to amend it. But what I shared with Councilman McDowell is, ironically enough, I just met yesterday with a gentleman. His name is Michael. I can't remember his last name. From Australia. He was one of the TED Youth speakers this weekend. But they have started. It's called City of Kindness, and it's an international organization that promotes acts of kindness internationally. Mayor Garcetti apparently was the first city in the U.S. to do it. There are no southern cities. No, there's no East Coast cities that have done it. And he was the TED Youth was at Adventure, and so somehow the leadership at Adventure was telling them that they thought that Columbia would be a great place. So he came to see me yesterday. He was also going to meet with Baron Davis at Richland too, and a couple other folks. And he was in the Interfaith Coalition, and he was hoping to come back within a month and wanted to see whether or not Columbia would be interested in being the first East Coast city to make the pledge and be part of the City of Kindness. So I just throw that out there that maybe kind of simultaneous with this, if that is something we want to pursue, maybe we go that avenue. And my understanding is there's similar, there's a pledge or resolution that we would do. It would need to be displayed in council chambers, and then we also would work with citizens on how do you promote acts of kindness, and there's like a website that keeps different things that supports acts of kindness as well as civil discourse.
It's a great program. The mayor of Anaheim was a big leader in that effort too. We have some of the background information. I think it could be a good step forward. I think we should however rededicate ourselves to this as well. And I think it's not meant to be a detailed document. It's meant to be more so of a moral document, guiding document. I think this is good, but I agree. I think the focus on kindness and compassion is so important.
Well, even in the, of course, the State of the City address, one of the things that we lifted up was that we become a city of compassion, a city that understands that and understands the parameters of that. So if I'm hearing correctly, we could very well take something like this, have a conversation with those persons when they return, and that we do the tweaking and the meshing of perhaps this and City of Kindness, and bringing it back before council.
Good idea.
What you think?
Yes, sir.
Sounds like a plan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
City of Kindness. Did
We
you Google
will
that?
move into today's budget workshop. I didn't forget that you all said you like meeting at Busby Street on the budget workshops, but because we finally were able to be back here with the elevator, being fixed, we just decided to stay one place. We'll start with a report from this morning from the Honorable Sam Davis on homeless services. That was a compilation of presentations by our service providers during this morning's Economic and Community Development Committee.
And committee. And committee.
And the committee, yes.
Well, we did meet with the three primary service providers on housing services. I think the outcome was essentially that we've got to continue to talk with them just based on the information that we shared and discussed this morning. Each organization, I think, they're proud of what they've done. They're proud of their numbers. We attempted to kind of maybe get some clarity on some of what has been, I guess, shared with us over the past year. I think some of the daily interactions with the public when it comes to people who are homeless, especially in the downtown areas, and also I think that the fact that well, one thing that I was surprised of that is that there was no outward request for additional dollars. Money wasn't on the table, and I think we kind of sort of not muddled through, but we had, I think, Tamika and you may want to agree, maybe some difficulty in agreeing that where the organizations are basically going in terms of their service delivery, not much, I think. Well, there is coordination, but when it comes to their ability to provide affordable housing, they're kind of focusing on that. Affordable housing is a challenge. Also, length of stay, their funding source. Housing first, I think, is more more focused on where they're going. Their timelines, I think, was their timeline is more predictable in terms of 262 days of stay, and
Up to 2,200.
no, 260 some odd days of stay before they transition to some degree of independence. Tamika, you would agree a difference of opinion when it comes to transition?
Difference of opinion between who? No, no. What I raised before I had to leave, so I don't know if Craig responded. I wasn't asking for a response. What I shared, he did.
Afterwards,
Okay.
he was.
Well, it is what it is. What I raised was that that transitions came about because MHA business leaders thought we weren't doing enough. They had a solution that they thought would work, and MHA was born. I do feel like there's been progress over the 8 years, but we're at a place where, and I can't speak for you guys, but what I shared was that I hear just a lot of concerns and complaints that people feel like transitions is not addressing the issue. And what I shared was that I'm not saying that they're not, but I think instead of being defensive about, the criticism or the perception that people have, which I feel like a lot of times when you bring a concern, you get more defensiveness. No, we're doing this, and we're given numbers. We need to stop being defensive, accept the perception is reality sometimes, and say, okay, how do we step outside the box? How do we stretch ourselves to do more and be more? So that was my concern, and I was just saying that we need to acknowledge that concern and perception out there in the community and figure out how we're going to address it. The other thing that I raised was, in the last year, I've seen a lot more of my clients in mental health court so the way the mental health court works, if someone is committed based on drug, alcohol abuse, or mental health, the law requires that they can be committed, the court can commit them, but once they are able to be discharged, you can no longer keep them, outside of, against their will. And so when I get involved, I'm representing them when they're ready to be discharged, or if they're not ready to be discharged, it's very clear they're not. In the last year, I've seen a lot more of my clients who are ready to be discharged, and the issue becomes placement upon discharge. And more are no longer able to go to transitions. And I understand transitions has rules, but what I was saying is what happens is the hospital can't keep them anymore, and so we have people who are known to have mental health issues. We're hospitalized because of mental health issues. Once the hospital finally gets them stable, they're discharged to the street. We all know that once they get on the street, they're not going to take their meds, and they fall back into an issue. And so there needs to be something that we do, and I understand, I'm not saying that transitions shouldn't have rules, but we need to recognize that if people can't go to transitions, the street is not the place that the hospital needs to be discharging them. And there needs to be some conversation among service providers as to what is that, what do we do, because it becomes an issue for law enforcement and us, because you've got these mentally unstable people on the street. So that was the concern I raised, but I did acknowledge I had to leave, so I put that on the table and then I left, so I didn't get to hear.
But it's
We had
the same
more.
old question, though, that comes up when, we're dealing with homeless in general, though, because there's no requirement, or you cannot make anybody accept the services. So it's a challenge both with a lot more, which I think we're gonna see more and more of the mental, as we've seen in the past, but that's the same problem we have. I mean, for weeks, we have people coming up here every week saying there's nowhere to go, but there is. They just don't want to abide by the rules. So we have, that's the
Well,
quandary we're in.
And Jennifer actually, so I think the light, to me, I saw the bright light of the entire presentation was there is a program they've been doing the last year and a half. They call it for their frequent flyers, but for the ones that are challenged. And so there are 42 people that they have finally gotten who are willing to go into the system. The issue becomes going back to where do you place them? And they don't have any place to place these people. So I do think they're trying to, building relationships and building rapport with folks who have been hard cases up to this point. But one of the things was you reach out to these people, you get them ready to get into the system, but then there's no way to put them. So some of these people are still on the street. Some of these people are in jail, and so there is an issue. But they acknowledge there's that, and they said about 20%. I think is the thing. There's about 20% that they can't. Yeah.
It's like 350 people, though.
But yeah, and
Create a
in,
whole bunch of problems.
in each case, though, they all have as part of their mandates to find some stable environments for them. The challenge with that is they're talking, in some cases, families, and in some cases, individuals. It's easier to place individuals than families, but they along with us have the same issue right now, and that is getting a supply of affordable housing for individuals or families. And that's a challenge, and Actually, we all know that that's a spinoff of deinstitutionalization anyway, with taking folks out of the institutions. And you're right, they have the ability to make their own decisions. As long as they can make competent decisions, then you can't tell them where to stay. You can't force them
But,
to. You can't force them to live anywhere.
but we
I mean,
we
that's,
need
I'm
to
just
make
saying
that,
that's
we need
that's
to make that
accepted.
transition to, that, you know,
Yeah.
look, you either get help through one of the service providers that, and there's, I mean, the one thing here, you're not gonna starve and you're gonna get care, everything that you can think you need is there available if you take it. But we're gonna have to make the broad leap at some point, that we're gonna require folks to either get into a program, accept the rules of housing, or they're gonna have to move on. They just can't continue just to infiltrate the streets in our community, because this is becoming a problem.
See, advocacy. Right.
Well, it is easier said than done, but at some point, we have to make the bold move that says it is, and then it becomes, it is what it is. We cave to every protester that comes down here from all over the United States, except for the people who live here. And this weekend is gonna be a prime example where we have 25,000 people rolling into town, and we're gonna have a problem in the Vista. Because you go down there on Saturday, and you've got the same group of people who are there, and they know that there are opportunities to move forward. They're not getting the help, and they're not doing the things that they need to do. And, you know, I'm not as compassionate about it, because I realize how much service, we've got 67 providers who provide homeless services in our community, and you know, I just think sometimes we're gonna have to be a little tough love here.
Well, I think another challenge in all that, Daniel, is that advocacy comes into play. You know, we don't regulate, but we help provide the services. But then you have advocates that always tend to challenge us as to whether or not we're doing enough, whether or not we're doing the right thing.
Or whether or not those providers are able to step out of the box and do things other than doing the same.
Over and
It's
over.
become a repetitive, it's become very repetitive for our providers, and I think that was some of the conversation we talked about today. When do we step out of the box and we make this something that's going to fit right into the impactation of economic development? One of the things that I said this morning, as I said, I didn't sit with you all, I sat on the side.
Sat on the wall.
I think we've got to come up with something. We've talked about Finley Park.
Yeah.
And we've talked about what we want to do over there. And a lot of communities, particularly those who are close
Most
to
contiguous
Finley
to it,
Park,
yeah.
they're excited about that. If we don't deal with this homeless situation in a way, whether it's through employment, I think we've got triage services that are already doing what they're supposed to do. What about those other folk who are ably ready to work? What's going to happen when we do that Finley Park piece and it becomes a 5-star park for homeless folk? That doesn't feel right.
And what, yeah.
It doesn't feel right. So the priority for me is, why not step out of the box with something that, and I think what I heard this morning was that there needs to be a deeper conversation on how we deal with folks who are homeless. Transitions, of course, got a little bit defensive, I think, if that's the right word.
Well, that was my whole point. I think to a certain extent, they're always defensive. We need to stop being defensive and figure out if that's the perception, whether we think we're doing a great job or not. That's the perception. How do we address that?
Yeah.
Please, Mr. Chairman.
We just agreed at the end of the meeting that they've got to continue to meet, come back, but also show the ability to go, to look at what's happening elsewhere, not just here in Columbia with the things we're trying to do. Obviously, I think you can pull, and they seem to agree, you can pull from a number of experiences in other parts of the country, see what works, what's not working, and what we need to maybe tweak here, and there's an agreement to do that, so. Yes, sir.
Speaking, y'all put me on the board of transitions place,
Oh, yeah?
Jamaica, so I've been going to their board meetings, and they are trying to think out of the box. We've had a strategic planning session. They have got a consultant from here in Columbia that's an expert on Medicaid, and they are changing some of their procedures so that they will qualify for Medicaid to get reimbursements for services that they have been providing. As has been said around the table several times, the problem is beds. Transitions have, I think, 264. 260.
That's what he said this morning.
Something around
Somewhere in
that
there.
number of beds, and almost every night they're full.
Mhm.
So when you identify people that need a bed, those beds are already filled at transition with people that do obey the rules mostly, and so there's no capacity. If we want to build capacity for beds, that's a problem that's going to be expensive for the whole community. So there are no easy answers for this. The best I've seen is what Tamika was talking about, where Kathy Riley and her group have identified the hardcore homeless and are working with about 40 people trying, and they're the ones that cause 90% of the problem. I think it's 20% causing 80% of the problem. Well, they are causing the problems, and they're beginning to get some of these people back to a point where they can get back into society. But there are no easy answers to the question, and certainly the city of Columbia by itself
Cannot do it.
cannot solve this problem.
So,
It's gotta be blanketed, it's gotta be covered.
Well,
We-
I know
we-
you
we-
wanted,
we
I
kinda
know
put a
you wanted to
bow
say
on it,
something. I just
yeah.
wanted to put two more things on the table. I think, the mayor talked about us doing the affordable housing, task force and revisiting, our commitment to adding to the inventory. So, I mean, I think that has to be part of the discussion, for this. But the other two other points I wanted to put out there is, to Daniel's point on kind of making people, that it's really hard, but there are certain things that they said again today, and I believe it's true. I haven't gotten a recent report, but the homeless court has been pretty successful. And I hear shaking heads at the homeless court, and they haven't had any repeat offenders that they've successfully completed. And so, the question becomes, is there a way that we get more folks in there? How do we, use kind of the stick of pending charges to try and get people in the system? So that could be one thing. And two, and I don't know, this is the point I wanted to make this morning, and I forgot because I had to run out. But I'll talk to Amy about it. But I have never seen any of the service providers, with the exception of Mercy, at any of my mental health court meetings. But placement always is an issue. And I think mental health court relies on the Department of Mental Health, which really hasn't been very, very helpful in finding places. But, maybe there is also, I'd have to look at the law, but maybe utilizing, if it's not homeless court, maybe the mental health court could also be that kind of stick, because Amy has a really good, or Judge McCullough has a really good opportunity when they're in front of them to put them in supportive housing that requires them to take their meds. Some people are placed on shots if they're not going to take their meds orally. So, but housing has never really been a piece of it, other than sometimes people are ordered to structured placement. The question becomes, where are you going to go? Because structured placement is not available within our community. All the structured placement facilities are full. But that's also something that we need to think about, because a lot of the homes that are out there are homes that, when they get proposed in different communities, we have the struggle with, no, we don't want a community care home in our neighborhood, da, 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 da.
Same folks telling us we need to do something about the problem.
But those are some options to kind of think about. How do we get that stick to try and help some of the the chronically homeless, and maybe those are some things that I don't think have been fully explored yet.
I just got a part of that is really educating the community. You know, I worked in that area for a long time, and you're right. Unless people, number one, those kind of houses were mandated by the state and the feds anyway, but they tend to qualify for more monies if these groups take advantage of specialized housing for people with special needs, and most of them have mental health issues, and they would qualify.
The crux of the problem is the state of South Carolina has woefully underfunded
Right.
mental health authorities
Right.
for the last 10 years or more.
Right.
And if you cut your funding down and your resources down at the state level, and it's been a state responsibility since the 1800s.
Right.
Well, I think it's a generational thing's changed a lot too. We've got families, you know, it used to be families took care of family members, and that model
Died out.
is slowly progressed. I think we're seeing more and more. I mean, there was always the fear of what would happen, and I think we're getting there. I think we ought to make a comment, a true comment that yes, I think there's been a lot of great things done, and we're addressing the people who can immediately get the help and the need. Our real problem and what we really got to focus on is those 350, 400 chronic folks who are not accepting and are just, you know, fighting the will of that, you know, they're just going to live this way. But we as citizens need to find an avenue to take care of that they either try to get help or find another way to address it, because that's the root of our problem. I think the agencies are doing a great job of placing those folks who are where they can, and a lot of the families and individuals, and I'm not going to say, we're always going to have a challenge in that. We saw that, remember we went to Miami, and they talked about, you know, all the people they helped, but they never could get the number to go down because it became the center, we're the capital, so.
So anyway, long and short, before you close, we'll agree that they're gonna keep talking.
One thing about the numbers, they did mention that the number of homeless population decreased by 40% from the first year that United Way, we contacted them. So I thought that was an encouraging number, but although when you get your emails or Facebook posts and stuff about homeless, they're still everywhere, so.
Yeah, I think that's always something Teresa and I have always questioned that. God bless you. A point in time count, but we've seen those same numbers. What we need, and this is just listen to everyone here, and just my thoughts as well. We need aggressive, proactive engagement with our homeless citizens. I mean, meeting them on the streets, finding out what their needs are, and making sure we have a robust enough effort to help meet those needs wherever they happen to be. Understanding that everyone will not avail themselves of the services, but at least some consistency in trying to reach people on a regular, thoughtful, structured, compassionate basis. Their only interaction with the public sector ought not be with the police department, and that's something that I believe that a compassionate community ought to do. It needs to be what I want to see, and thank you for the report. I look forward to reviewing the documents, Mr. Chairman. I want to see strong coordination and cohesion between all of our partners, especially those that are receiving public money, making sure that we're contracting with United Way, we support transitions and everyone else in their work. These folks, and I wish I wasn't in the room, so I won't be able to characterize the feedback, but I know that the folks who are providing homeless services are taking income and fire nonstop. I mean, they're dealing with the most challenging situations you can possibly deal with. So I can imagine that if they feel that people are pointing fingers or what have you, the natural reaction that comes from it. The reality is that it's tough work. They're on the front line. Police departments on the front lines. But I think what we have to see, particularly as we secure the public trust and public funding, is we at least have to make sure that the coordination's there, and that there's some continuity of services being provided, at least with the money that we're doing. If we do it, and we do it in a thoughtful way, then the ability to leverage other partners, the ability to leverage philanthropic sources if we get creative, and either making sure people get some of the services they need, or making sure people get access to jobs to get back into the American economy. I mean, I think we'll find more partners if we're able to show that level of coordination, which sometimes seems to elude us. The homeless population is still not a homogenous group of individuals. Still very heterogeneous, and it's changed dramatically. And that's why I really wanted to make sure we had this discussion, even from 4 years or 8 years ago. Everything from the federal and state disinvestment in mental health services, to opioids, and to a number of communities outside of the city in the region who've not been able to maintain their level of services. They've shut down the shelter in Orangeburg, for example. So we're becoming more of a regional cause, meeting the needs, for better or for worse, either in a very altruistic way, just helping meet the needs of the entire region, but also some communities who don't want to deal with the most difficult characters. We'll put them on buses, and I'm just being frank about it.
So, Mr. Mayor, I guess that's a perfect example to my point,
Yeah.
is that we know what the numbers say, but I guess when you bring that point up, Craig is like, but these are the numbers. 50%, 60% is Richland County and whatever. We hear that's the numbers and accept that the numbers, but instead of the response doesn't need to be, well, no, that's not true. People aren't busing them here, or that's not an issue. It needs to be more so, okay, the numbers tell us this, but we recognize that at least there is definitely a feeling that this is going on. This is how we're addressing it. I guess that was just my point.
And how it's quantifiable, how you quantify is one another, but we know that there are very specific examples that we've engaged with several of our homeless services providers, and we know that that's happened, and we've addressed it, and we've been able to address it effectively. So,
And those aren't the individuals that he
Right.
is dealing with, which is why we had this conversation afterwards, and he wants to engage y'all, he wants y'all to come for a visit, whatever. I mean, what I think the balance has to be, and I was explaining to him, no one is underestimating, and please don't take, if you weren't doing what you're doing, we would have an even bigger issue that we're dealing with on a daily basis. So I want you to keep trucking and doing what you're doing. It's that smaller percentage that gets the focus, or citizens feel like when they're talking to their council members, because if your child is, if you're walking down Main Street or in Philly Park or wherever it might be, and you have an interaction, that's the impression that you're left with. And heaven forbid, because of mental illness, or one of our individuals we deal with chronically, they have a really bad day, and it's that one instance where something really bad happens. That's what we're trying to avoid, and not further the perception that Transitions isn't doing what they're supposed to do, and United Way's not doing what they're in Housing First. We need to expand upon those things, but I think also what we tried to reiterate today, Mr. Mayor, is that coming each year with a report out is great. What would be better and more helpful is some more tangible things as to how we move the needle forward now with where we are right now. Y'all have you're at 5 years from when you put the RFP out. I understand that we're talking a lot about with United Way what they're doing as far as that chronic population, those 40. But for a meeting in this room, that was very candid, and we need y'all to work on that. I think they've been working from that original RFP, and they said that today. They acknowledge now that what y'all put out during a different place and time 5 years ago is different from where we are now. So they either need to reissue the RFP with some specific deliverables, or let them keep trucking, but we've got to be very specific annually on what the outcomes need to now be.
it's the former, not the latter. I mean, we need to see active engagement in the street. And when someone has an unpleasant interaction with someone who's having an episode on Main Street or Vista or whatever it happens to be, I want to make it clear that's not the fault of Transitions.
Correct, and that is absolutely not what we're
Or the
saying.
police department or
Correct.
anyone else. I mean, this is a combination of a number of different events that no one in this room, and maybe in this entire central business district had a role in making help happen. What we do have our control is the response, and I think that response needs to be thoughtful, it needs to be creative, it needs to be compassionate, it needs to be results oriented in some way, and the way in which we impact that the most is how we use local dollars, state dollars, and federal dollars that we direct. And we got to be very creative in how we do that. I'd love to see a much more robust effort engaging with individuals on the street every single day. As soon as they get here, as soon as we identify new ideas, new faces. I mean, there's so much more we need to do, and yes, we need to communicate that very effectively to our partners, and making sure that we all realize that we're partners in doing it. So maybe a redefinition of the relationship is important, but with the understanding that it's not our provider's responsibility to only, it's not their responsibility, only their responsibility to reduce the homeless population and also to help meet the needs of our individuals. It's a collective responsibility, and we got to constantly make sure that reflects itself not just in our policy making, our contracting, but also in the tone in which we engage with them. Perception is reality. Just as we talk about crime and crime rates and everything else, and whether someone's safer or they feel safer, it's very much the same. I don't feel the population's down 40% or whatever, and Teresa and I give each other the same look every year when we see those numbers.
And I pushed back on that a little bit today, or I tried to, but I didn't mean to infer at all that the work that is being done is not work that needs to be done. I feel like for the contracts that y'all have in place, they need to be more narrowly defined to address what the core issues are right now. And that's that smaller population of more challenging individuals. It appears based off everything we know. And I think United Way has acknowledged that. And they've talked about more outreach. So does that equate to the money being spent on an additional person who's doing outreach? I mean, that's what I was saying. Bring back what relates to what we're saying needs to be done.
Somebody in these streets engage with folks, and then also the challenge. Council didn't make a decision. It was a pre-made zoning decision about even the location of transitions.
And the chief raised that today, and I don't know if maybe that colonel might have taken.
That is an acknowledged problem that transition acknowledges.
Well, the providers push back on
They are
that.
not in the
You're kidding.
best place for them.
Back on that meeting. Was
They push back,
Okay.
but if
We
you-
had
if
zoning
you
for 'em.
put the, if
We
you
had
don't
zoning
have the-
for
I
them,
know,
but
but
Kathy
services in
and
the
that crowd
core,
didn't want to go to
then
where we
you're
had
gonna
them
spend
zoned.
all day getting
Transport.
people
We had
to
land.
wherever the
We
services
had it
are,
pre-zoned, so
which
we wouldn't
might
get into a
not
fight
be an
in the
effective
neighborhood.
use of time, resources, and you're gonna miss people. They feel like they've got a better handle with it all being central to the core, is what they said
I don't
today.
agree with that.
But I think
personally don't
the chief's response to that was, I gotta take them there anyway. So whether they're in the core or wherever the services may be, we're gonna get people there because we're doing it now.
Doesn't help the neighbor across the street from transition either.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I think we all agree that we pretty much have a handle on where we are, what the successes are, what we need to do, and the conversation needs to continue, and we need to just set up some dates and times with some specifics.
Do you want them to come back to the committee?
It's time to reissue the RFP. Start
Well,
working on the working draft.
And I wasn't suggesting that you do another whole RFP, but I do think it's some type of renewal, or amend the contract and ask for.
It's fair and smart. Yes. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next item on the budget workshop is the parking fund discussion. Missy will walk you through that. Missy Kaufman, Missy Gentry, and I don't know if Elle is in the room, but.
She was supposed to.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We've got an little interview she's supposed to be helping us out with.
Where is she?
It's a lot going on with the tournament, so she's gotta do an interview with Skip regarding parking and safety.
Is our garage charging at $30 a day?
No.
Is that one of USC's?
Yeah, so that's what she's doing an interview about. So
Yeah.
if you saw the
The
The-
young lady.
The
if you
piece,
if you saw the piece last night, it did not distinguish that was not our parking garage, and we don't have the responsibility for the safety in USC's garages. But today, Elle and Skip will be meeting with that reporter, and hopefully there will be a better story today about our garages and also just overall tournament safety. But that's what they're doing. But that wasn't our garage, and we
State newspaper had it.
I've got
did they?
They didn't mention who owned the garages. They just said that the garages here would be $30. The garages, and they mentioned a couple of ours were $10, I believe.
You're talking about for the tournament.
Tournament,
charge,
For the
yeah.
tournament.
Ours is 20 for events.
Events.
Yeah, that's what they charged the other night for Elton John.
But that's what they were talking about. That wasn't ours.
The city garage, yeah, it was. Park Street garage, sure was. I parked there. I know what the big sign said, $20.
Park
That's
Street
not
is
one-
University garage.
No, it isn't. The one connected to the convention center hotel?
Yeah.
That'd be the city garage.
For,
That's not the-
for
but
the
that's not what the
events,
break-in
but it
was.
was the
No,
Yeah, the break-in was at USC.
yeah. Judy's car.
we're gonna be proactive, and hopefully they will
Judy Gatson got broken
they will
into.
give us the
Her
information.
husband's car. I think.
Allow us to share all the information regarding the
No, I just saw it on
fees
Twitter.
and locations for the tournament. All right, Ms. Nikki.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. We have a short discussion today, or a short topic rather, and maybe not be a short discussion. Today we are talking to you primarily about the proposed parking fund budget for FY 19-20, which is timely considering our conversations were just about parking. A lot of activities are going on in the parking system. The proposed budget for FY 19-20, I'll give you the next slide, is $8,858,970. That is just a little bit over a 2% increase over the current year budget, about $165,000. We're going to talk through a little bit about what makes up that net change, and it's a net offset from between revenues and expenditures that are happening.
It says on there, I'm a little confused. One says it's up by 6%.
Well, the top part, and this may be where it's confusing because I broke out, the top part is the total budget. Below here, I'm talking about revenues. Revenues coming in is actually 8.5. Transfers in other words, use of fund balance, that's a other financing source and use. So when we add those together, that's what makes up the $8,855,000.
What would we transfer into the parking?
The parking fund balance, not transfer in, it's a financing use, so it's use of fund balance, parking fund balance. And that's coming down below. Right. So operating revenues would actually be those revenues coming in from our parking garages, our street meters, our non-moving violations, also known parking tickets, or those lovely little orange envelopes that we sometimes get on our windshields, lots and other special event revenues. Parking meter revenue is up, and we're seeing an increase in there. A lot of that, of course, is attributed to the use of the parking app, the mobile app that's out. Yes, sir.
I had a question for Elle, but since Elle is not here, I will give it to you and the city manager maybe.
And Ms. Gentry, yes.
I have noticed that a lot of our parking meters have been taken off, and you only have the option now of using the app. The app is the most expensive way to park, and when you pay that convenience fee, you're paying a whole lot more than if you use the cheapest way to use it is the card that you put in. The next cheapest way would be the coins that you put in, but the most expensive way is the parking app. And if you have a meter post that's been cut off, and you have only the option of using that app, that eliminates a lot of people that will not have the app on their phone or whatever. So I would strongly advise us to, if we want to put the parking app sign up there, that's fine, but leave a meter on the top so you have the option of using the cheapest way for parking.
philosophical discussion on which direction we're going, but.
It's
I mean,
cost a lot
I'll
to
just
use
say it that way because there's some nuances about where we put the apps and what meters we left up. But Missy, you wanna take a stab at that? And I'm not meaning this in any way because I hear it from my mom. So generational, I know as to what people are used to doing, what they prefer to do. My mom ain't gonna download an app to park at the meters. I get it, and there are people who prefer not to do that. But
A lot of it is availability of the parking meters that we use and a decision of whether we're gonna go to a different style meter or not. We were having to retrofit some of those older meters, so a lot of the areas that are app only are highly utilized by students. Not all of them, because we all go all over the city, but we were deliberate in trying to make those areas that are student heavy, because most of today's students have the app, and most of my generation up may choose not to use the app. So we've been very conscious of that, but we'll take a look again and see how many meters we have available. But the meters that we currently use, we can't buy new ones. So we would have to go to a different style meter.
The old-fashioned meter with the slot in it for the car is
Well,
being phased out.
we can't buy the style of meter that we currently have in place. Now, there's meters available, and we've had long conversations about credit card meters even, and so we just need to make a decision of which style meter we're gonna use going forward.
Spaces aren't wide enough for my Studebaker either, by the way.
We'll try to accommodate that too.
I'm getting messages. Y'all make sure your mics weren't covered and we can all hear you and you're speaking to work.
You could always
Mine is
park it
intentionally
in 2 meter spots, Mayor, and pay both of them. Ms. Devine?
So I guess the question becomes, you're saying we just need to make a decision. When is that decision going to be made? And prior to that decision being made, have we done any citizen engagement to just discuss that? Because I do think we need to be making an investment that's going to be long term. I mean, I know we're doing stuff with the garages, but as we decide, oh, hey, this is the way we're going to go with this type of meter, and that's going to be something that the bulk of folks who work downtown don't utilize or don't like, then that's not a good investment. So we need to be making some community some surveys and acknowledge. I mean, I know when I go to other cities, they'll have, the box, but you have the option, credit card, I guess they have apps, I don't know, but credit card app or even sometimes money. So I know there are a lot of options out there, but before we decide on an option, we need to be figuring out what's going to work best for our city.
Absolutely. And we've had conversations for years too about the pay stations, and we have those in our garages and some of them. But that's probably a more appropriate method in today's time. The challenge with that is then you're going to have to, your customers are going to have to walk a distance and then walk back to their car to put the little ticket on there. That's the way a lot of agencies are going.
In Atlanta, you don't have to do that anymore. You don't have to put your ticket on there. You put your license plate in it, and you put your phone number in it, and it tweets you when you're about to run out, and this and that. There's no convenience fee. It's all included in the price. It's a single tower. You mark the space. It makes it easy because when you're somewhere and you get that tweet, you got to get back or whatever, but you can also you can pick your time. You can maximize it. What I liked about it is the convenience of it. You have to learn your license plate, but it's inconvenience there. But other than that, it makes it easier for the parking folks as well, because they can just go to the tower and then they know the space. They're not going to each meter.
Right. And some of the new technology will even send notifications if something's expired.
Right.
The example you're talking about, it sounds like you would still have to have an app on your phone. And again, we need to.
There's no app on
Okay,
your
it's
phone.
just a text with the phone number.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can choose to do that or not. I do it all the time because then I know I'm about to get a
Well,
$20 ticket.
we will certainly look at
Just to
options
keep
and
it-
bring
just
back
to keep us
recommendations.
on track. I mean, all of us get solicitations regularly. The technology's changes so rapidly in parking, and quite frankly, I think we all are wondering if in 4 or 5, 10 years, if this would be a revenue stream at all, just the way the world's going. So let's continue to look at what other solutions might be out there that allow us to adjust accordingly, maximizing revenues and also enhancing the customer experience as folks are using it. But continue to keep eyes kind of down the road on what do we do in the world of autonomous vehicles and ride sharing, and when this revenue stream, sorry Jeff, goes away at some point. So, but let's continue to iterate, learn. So what you basically got from us is that we want everything.
Without a funding source.
We want everything. I mean,
Without
which is what you get from people everywhere. I mean, there's so many different points of view, and the world's just changing so fast. So how do we just kind of stay ahead of the curve? And obviously, we've had some really good stewardship of the system in the last few years. Ellen and her crew done a good job.
And make sure we invest in something that's going to have some staying power,
Yeah, as long as there's staying power.
which these days is pretty short.
They even saw some really interesting technologies just last night, as a matter of fact, looking at how ways in which cities and other governments can begin to first monitor and then regulate and then potentially monetize just mobility in general. Some software that's being piloted in Los Angeles that allows us to be able to track every TNC, every Uber and Lyft, every scooter, eventually autonomous vehicles, and to be able to control that grid prospectively down the road in the world again. And where a lot of these funds, I mean, you think about electric vehicles, gas taxes are going to very soon be obsolete. Parking fund revenues that we use to fund infrastructure. The world's changing, so we're going to have to figure out how, as policymakers, and no one in the entire country is ahead of the curve. Technology is always way ahead of us. How do we at least try to keep up so that we're able to continue to provide the services we need? But it's changing fast, really fast.
Just ask telecommunications.
Yeah,
Same thing with cell phones, no landlines, bringing
Telecom,
revenues.
whole nother challenge.
So with that, revenues for the garages, we are projecting a 6% increase over budget, which is in line with prior year actuals, which meant that we were able to reduce the amount of use of fund balance. Other sources of revenue that are non-operating or other financing uses would be the interest revenues and then rents and use of property. Of course, street meters and garages are our two primary sources.
I'm just curious, and I'm not trying to start something. So all the free, or the parkings and businesses that they charge parking for in the Vista and Everville, do they have a separate business license, or all that?
The valet parking,
No, like,
or if they have their own
Lots.
garages,
Did we
their own
get the
lots.
lots?
They have their own
Get
lots.
the
yeah,
lots and
like
stuff.
their own lots after hours. They, turn it into a parking lot that they charge.
That's the
5,
room.
10,
That's
20,
private
$15.
lots. If private lots with private revenue, they
And typically, some of these valet companies are managing those lots at night. Southern Valet manages a lot of the lots in the Vista, but they do have a business license.
On the revenue? I'm just curious.
We can work with business license to see what they're reporting, and what they're paying based on, but we can certainly look into
He's
that.
got a running list of some different things we're checking.
I wasn't
now,
trying
so
to start a new thing. I was just curious.
add it to the list. He's got a running list of things we're checking.
But we do have lots too. The city does have some parking lots as well. So, next on expenditures, so the operating departments that make up the parking fund are those departments that are directly related to the operations of the parking system. Those department budgets total $5.1 million, which is an increase of right at about 4% or less than $200,000. Parking services is the largest function of that agency, of the parking fund, at $3 million. It's basically flat, no change from the current year. That would be the actual parking operations folks that manage the garage, manage the systems. There is one new position for event operations and extended booth coverage. Those are customer service folks. And part of the reason why there's no change is that there was no capital replacements for this year, so that offset the increase for the personnel addition. Next, we have the parking facilities. That would be the support services crews. Those are the folks that actually maintain the physical structure of the garages and the lots. That budget is 1.7 million, which is an increase of 121,000 or 7%. As we switch to the new parking garage control equipment, that is a cloud-based solution, and there's an annual maintenance and support along with that new system. Also, the addition of the Divine Street garage, a lot of which is the electricity and then some maintenance functions of that garage.
What's gonna be in the cloud from the parking?
Well, the actual communications and the management of the system. So. That system also is managing the monthly customers, and that's the monthly customer database. Debt services is a slight reduction from current year at 2.7 million. The other addition in the non-departmental section of the budget would be the addition of a parking funds portion of a citywide computer refresh. That's a citywide replacement, and this is just the parking fund that reflects the addition of the parking funds, the staffing, technology that's used within parking. What's also not listed here is we do have some funding at this point for cost of living and merits that's reflected in the department budgets. That would be for the staff that's actually part of the operating departments of the parking fund, and that's of course proposed. It's not yet adapted until the budget is adopted. Just to sort of move on with regards, there's a lot happening as we've talked about with the parking fund. The parking garage control equipment, it's in place and going live here in the next month or two. And it's primarily at 4 garages for now. It's Lincoln Street Garage, Park Street, Lady Street, and Sumter Street. Also later in the year, there'll be the issuing of a parking rate study, which may take into account some of the conversations that were just discussed with regards to new technologies perhaps and new investments that will be needed to sort of continue to modernize the parking system. A lot of work has been done already, so this will just continue moving forward. But at that, the schedule at this point would produce a RFP late summer, early fall, hopefully late summer. And again, takes into all the capital investments plus the ongoing maintenance that we have of our garages. And the results anticipated would be in time for the next budget cycle.
Anything you want to mention regarding the soft changes that we've kind of rolled into the upgrade of the control equipment, Lincoln Street and City Club?
So y'all are all aware that we're in the process of replacing our hardware and software systems, and it's taken a little longer than we intended, but we also recognize the importance of getting it right before we go live. So we are working on the Lincoln Park, Lady, and Sumter Street garages right now. We will not be live by the weekend, but we are certainly staffing all of the garages, recognizing the influx that are of people coming in this weekend and the need to balance the demand and supply of the parking. So we're actively working around the clock, and I literally mean around the clock, both city staff and the consultants, to go live as quickly as possible, but not sooner than it's actually ready. We recognize you get one shot to get it right. So when we go live, we want it to be everything that we talk about it being. And it will certainly increase efficiencies both for the city managing our system, but also for the customer using our system. So we're excited about the changes coming, and there's been a lot of communication with our monthly users specifically about this process, and as well as our event users, because there's a lot of challenges managing the event space too, the event parking. So we're trying to be very hands-on with all of the stakeholders who use our garages for parking, and y'all too will get additional credentials that will provide different accesses into the garage. So that's a process underway. I wish I had a date certain for you, but we recognize, again, we've got to get it right before we officially go live. So that's coming in the very near future.
Lincoln Street specifically, was there something we wanted to make sure?
Oh, with Lincoln Street, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Lincoln Street, when we first built Lincoln Street Garage, we recognized that it would take some time before the demand for that garage was at capacity. We're approaching that time. When we went live, we allowed the first hour to be at no cost in the garage. That's not per ordinance. That's not advertised anywhere. So as we're implementing the new system, we're taking away that free hour, unless y'all direct us otherwise.
I wasn't saying for them to direct us otherwise. I was just wanting them to be aware in case they heard about it or anything else with the transition. I know, Capital City Club, I think we're working through the new
We are.
rates with them and their customers, and I think that's going pretty well.
One of the things you ought to consider, and, you know, Charlotte Airport does it, other places do it, the first 20 minutes is free. So that if somebody's really just zipping in, having to stop, grab something, but, you know, it's done on the ticket. So, you know, obviously if you stick it through and you've been there 20 minutes, you lose the ticket, you pay the full freight. But, you know, we ought to look at something, there ought to be some type of grace period in there, especially as we're getting tighter in parking places.
And we are really at capacity to the most part in all of our garages. One thing we're also doing as we're changing this equipment out is recognizing that the design of some of our older garages, it had the meter and the visitor parking at the top levels instead of at the bottom. We're changing that. That's evolving. That's not a easy process. A lot of our older garages where people have been parking there since they can remember, they want to be at the bottom as well, but the model across the industry is you put your most convenient parking as your visitor parking, so you can get the in and out that are patrons of the businesses. So that process is underway. We recognize how delicate that is to a lot of our monthly parkers, and we're working through that. So if you do hear of that, that's definitely going on. Yes, sir.
Talking about your monthly parking, I use the Cannon Street garage most of the time when I come downtown. And if it's an event like First Thursday, you come down at 6 o'clock when you think the garage is gonna be vacant, and you ride 4 floors up, passing all these reserved for so-and-so, reserved for so-and-so, reserved for so-and-so. Why do we have it reserved 24/7? Why don't we let them park anywhere after 6 o'clock?
So part of that is signage, and part of that is agreements. And again, we're getting new agreements signed by all of our monthly parkers. Some of the old agreements, including even in Cannon, even though that's our newest garage, for reserved parking, it did not have specific times. So we've got to work on the agreements with those monthly parkers to say that's during business hours, and at night, you know, it's going to be open to the public. And then we have to sign it so that the public knows that. Most of our garages on reserved spaces, there's no indication that after hours you can park there. So that's something we've got to change. Yeah, and also the model is going away from reserved spaces. If you think about it, when somebody has a reserved space, if they're not there, nobody else can park in it. So the model across the industry is trying to minimize reserved spaces. Again, that can't happen immediately for us because especially our older garages, there's a lot of customers that wouldn't be relentless on calling all of us and all of y'all as we let that evolve. But we are very conscious of the reserved versus unreserved and the need as we struggle to balance the demands of freeing up as much space as we can.
So I know the study is going to be on the parking rates, and I know that we're not too far from the actual parking assessment study, but as the city is growing, we're getting a whole lot more development downtown. I know we've done some creative things to try and encourage the private developers to do parking that will be available, but have we done any updates on the parking needs and just strategy around making sure that we're adding to our inventory?
We are talking about that every day, actually. We're one thing we're doing, and this new equipment will allow us to do, is better manage the supply demand with regards to we know who's in our garage, who's paying to be there, and not the access to people who are not paying to be there will be very limited. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities for people to have slipped in and out after hours or when the gates were up, and that's going to go away. And that's not a deliberate effort driven for revenue, it's a deliberate effort to manage the supply demand because we are at capacity. We're also, as we talk, as developers come to us and want to do projects, we're obviously talking about what that looks like from a public parking standpoint. And can the parking be used, if it's a residential facility, can the parking be used when the residents are at work? You can't oversell your parking 100% of it, but obviously people who live in certain areas drive away during the day and vice versa. If you're working downtown during the day, that space should be free at night. So we're looking for all of those opportunities. And again, this equipment will allow us to better manage. We're also looking, some of our garages do not have gate equipment. So as we update agreements and tune in on who's parking and who's actually paying to park, some of that will evolve and spaces are freeing up.
Study. So the last several years, we've had a couple studies, one that looked at the market and the rates, and another that took a look more at what the facility needs were. The study that we're talking about will resemble more what we do in water and sewer, taking a look at what our rate structure is, the revenues that come in, and what the needs of the system are and how we're funding that. The parking system still has outstanding debt of about $40 million. There are rate covenants in that. We haven't, in the past, we always make sure we're within that, but in order to work the necessary work at the different decks throughout, we're going to need to have some expenditures going on. So we need someone to help us take a look, make sure we stay within those bond covenants, and that it'll be a little bit of a combination of the past studies that we've done and brought it all together. So it might look a little more similar to what we do each year with water and sewer.
I'm going to add a little more too. Well, we are very conscious of the taxing of our system. We're not wed to the city's the only parking provider. We reach out to private companies as well, and if we can help make parking available for a project to go forward, we'll certainly do that. We also are creative with our street parking. If there's areas that are not highly utilized, we have in and out passes for businesses and residential to try to, again, encourage development and recognize we want everybody to come downtown and live, work, and play. So we're maximizing the use of our spaces.
So unless there's any other questions, that concludes our discussion of the parking garage proposed budget. Next is just, where'd it go?
So we're trying to bring back various items during the budget workshops that you all have mentioned. We really talked about this already in the retreat. You should have a copy of the form. A hard copy?
I don't.
No.
The form for us to.
Council directed form? I saw it online, but.
Here it is. So we just want you to take another look at it. We're ready to probably start implementing this if you all are in agreement with it. I'm hearing a lot from you all. I know this is a very forward-thinking council. You are wanting us to take advantage of the economy, creative ideas. With that comes lots of opportunities and discussions with vendors and all types of people that have great ideas. And many of them are things we may take advantage of. But my only, not a caution, but I guess reminder would be we're always going to try to do our due diligence to make sure that for the time and energy spent in looking into some of these things, it's going to accomplish what council's trying to accomplish.
What
as a whole.
rises to the level of being a council-requested project? If I ask Clint to
I
take
would
a water bill,
say
is that a project?
no, sir. I would say
The glow run.
the glow run, maybe that would have been a council directed project, Mr. Bye, but it's all good. So we're and see the other, I think of the other
That's been part of date
thing
night
we
with
would get
Divine.
out of doing this is that all of you would then become aware of the other council members' idea or thought. and we can then go down a path, at least to a point, to bring you something back for a consensus to be reached around moving forward. I don't think it's something as simple as your day-to-day thing, so that is not what I'm saying, but
So will you
I
be
think it would
responsible
be-
for telling us, fill out a
So,
form?
so basically, I mean, this
well, I'm
goes
looking
back
for
to
some
chasing.
feedback on how you
If-
want to
if
proceed with
If it
it.
requires staff, time, and resources to, outside of your normal, then it should rise to.
Well, to the point it gets in depth, and I think probably this is a perfect example, is using the Klein property. I mean, staff chased around with a developer for I don't know how long, but nobody took the time to do the math on so I think what she's encouraging. No, the first Klein property deal, where it didn't pencil out at all. So I think that's probably, this makes a lot of sense. And I think it's good for us to realize that a lot of things that get proposed end up, we're having to put staff or a new staff or this and that. That costs money. It's gotta be budgeted.
Go through the form, Teresa.
Sure, I'll let Missy do it. I mean, we started down the path because a lot of us have state government experience, and there's something called a FISC. A lot of y'all know about fiscal impact statements that are routinely used on state level.
So this form is to be filled out by who?
Staff.
By staff.
Staff.
In response to the request. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay, I thought we were filling that
Or-
on top.
Yeah, that's.
Well, I don't know,
Combination, it's
Missy,
kind of a
what was your-
combination, right?
I'm not trying to put another piece of paper in front of you to fill out. I think I get enough, the ACMs get enough, and I would, in general, if it's something on that level, y'all are requesting it through me, or we're having conversations with me and ACM about it. But we can certainly fill out the form, or if you want to fill out the form, I don't necessarily think that matters.
Not meant to be arduous on the requester so much. The department would really be the one to provide the information about the personnel, if the impacts. Mostly what we would look from council or the manager or ACMs would be just at least a description of what it is that's being asked for or requested.
Right, and then let us go from there, and then we would bring it back to you as a group. Maybe have an initial conversation with a council member who requested it, and then bring it back to the full council.
And then you will have a list of these things, so all of us can see.
So did we decide you're gonna fill it out with our input
With
if we
your
need it?
input.
Okay, so we won't fill it out, but if you get a request and y'all will know whether or not it rises to the level, y'all will fill it out and then.
We will know that this has been brought to your attention and comes back to us.
Yes, sir.
This is the feedback that we get back from you and staff.
Yes, sir.
Is there like a time, like a turnaround time?
No, I haven't thought about it in that depth. I'm appreciating all of this feedback.
Because
Several of you have asked for this over time, and we just never kind of put it into place. And so this budget cycle, we decided, let's go for it, because, like I said, there are a lot of opportunities, I think, right now. A very forward-thinking council. You all know there's some things we've been talking about for weeks that, is risky moves, some people might say. Has it been worth the energy and time spent? Absolutely. When you get ready to take action on it, you can take action on it. But for some things, I think we're going to have to, if it's a solution out there or some vendor is involved, it takes a little bit more than just internal resources sometimes to track all that down and do the due diligence. And so we want to make sure there's some consensus around that effort.
is this something that can be reduced to some type of a very basic form that we could even fill in on a smartphone or what have you? I mean, sometimes sometimes it's something that's very well thought out, the idea, although maybe not given consideration to fiscal impact. Sometimes it really is a whim. I saw something. I saw something really, really good, a good idea.
Yeah.
We need to do some due diligence there. So I think simplifying as much as possible. So maybe even this form might take the place, it's still of course a public document, but take the place of an email or what have you. It's all one place, one time, and then within whatever time, this is as much for your folks to respond back to you as it is for you to respond back to us. I'm just thinking the easiest way that we can kind of get all this in one place at one time.
Can definitely
It's
be
just
made a fillable
worth-
form or
Just a thought. And then obviously, my thought is the primary responsibility of council is just making sure that what we are focusing most of our time and resources is consistent with our strategic plan, our vision, and our goals. Understand that some things will be outside of that at times, but the vast majority of requests should be there. But it's if we're gonna have a module that requires us to kind of get this information in one central place and get thoughtful response back, we also have to think about the timing response. I mean, so if we get this back in a few days, it's one thing. If we get back in a few months, it's a whole nother thing.
Right.
So give some thought to all that. What problems?
And I think that you're right, Mayor. You all, with this latest iteration of your strategic planning and your retreat, you all gave us some very specific items, big ticket items that we've been working on. I think as we've acknowledged we're working on those, there have been some other things that have risen to the top that might be a programmatic thing that's great for the city, or it might be a solution that's related to water and sewer. I mean, whatever it might be, we were just thinking, if it came up outside of that whole strategic planning, retreat planning, because a lot of consensus was already built around certain things, how do I bring some other additional things back to the table? You know, and sometimes we fill out the form and we bring it back to the whole council, and then there's that reminder, okay, this is good. Remember, in your retreat, you decided these are the things we're focusing on. So if we're going to start focusing on this, then we might have to shift priorities, resources, etc. This is sort of meant to be the mechanism to put these additional things on the table for a collective discussion.
Is there also maybe, I don't know if it's monthly, maybe quarterly, like sometimes there's something that does rise to, we all know about it, but we hear about it, but if we're not directly involved, we don't hear anything else about it till a year later. Is there maybe an ongoing, like, quarterly briefing or something you could say, like, you know, council's still reviewing, you know, revenue generation, we've done da-da-da-da, just without it being on our agenda, but so that we all know, yes, this is moving forward, or no, it died because it didn't go anywhere, you know, whatever.
Absolutely. I mean, I used to do a manager's report written, I think, and I kind of stopped.
So this could very well, I'm sorry.
No, sir.
So this could very well be something that you step out of the box to do, and something, say in the past, that we talked about. All right. We don't fill this out. You all do that. We talk through it with you guys, or what?
Right. I think like any
You
one
need
of
to do
you
a
might.
3-page summary of your project you want and present it to the manager before it gets.
But I think,
Don't look like we gon'
let's use this as a starting point. Let's think through the rest of the process, because I think what we might wind up doing is not pinpointing the problems that we're trying to solve, and wind up with a whole lot more work than we thought about. But this is the thought process we all need to be going through. So let's think about how best we can actually act on it. We, as things are coming to you and to everyone else on the team, we need to be making sure that our requests, particularly those that will require time and energy and resources, are consistent with our strategic plan. That's key. And if we're going to have a huge ask that's not on this page, then we need to be able to quantify exactly what it's going to require, and then a decision made by us as policymakers, or you within your signature authority, how we just redirect some funds in a recurring or non-recurring way.
Yes, sir.
Non-recurring, yeah. I know what you're trying to do. So let's just think through it, how best we can do it.
Okay.
So we're not chasing chasing rabbits, we're chasing buffaloes. I mean, now some big ticket items with a lot of time and energy and everything else. And
Our problem has been not the buffaloes, it's the rabbits that
Rabbits,
cost us $100,000 here and there is what eats up the budget.
So the process makes sense. Let's make sure we're giving everyone less work, or if it's more work, it's more meaningful work and strategic work, and not just more work. So
Okay.
I'll digest it some more too.
Perfect. Thank you. You got that, Missy?
I think I do. Thank you. That's good input.
Okay. And then, we're just showing you some topics. We've covered many of these. Trying to look real quickly at which ones we have here. So, some of the other county, lots of county items, fire and 911 communications. It's my understanding that we may be getting some feedback on 911 communications in the next, not today's county council meeting, but maybe in April. They might be acting on that. I know, Mr. Rickman, you had asked about some information you have over time. We've asked for it on the detention center. Mr. Bedora had asked us for some historical information. I think we've given him that.
Yes,
I
was that
What I
recently?
emailed
Was it recently?
Mr. Bedora's
Been-
request.
a couple months ago.
A couple months ago, yeah. I mean, I think mainly, like, what would it mean if we operated our own jail? I mean,
Oh,
that's
okay, so
not,
along those lines.
yeah, that's, we don't
I think
advocate doing that, but we do think that the jail certainly can be, more forthcoming with some information.
Especially with the huge increase that they're
Yeah,
requesting.
right.
With no, not an ounce of documentation.
And then I know Mr. Duval's asked for some additional topics of discussion in April, working on those.
They were good topics, I'm sure, but what were they?
It's about, some, transfer information
Okay.
and,
Transferring,
some.
transferring. Did I hear the word
And
transfer?
then, there was one other, Mr. Duval. Forgot what it was. But if there are any other items that y'all have, we wanted to get that back, hear that from you today too. There were other items you wanted us to add, other than the normal, we're gonna go through all the funds like we normally do, and any other big topics, so.
I just, it won't, I mean, it's a rounding error, but, gateway enhancement is still.
Gateway, okay.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, I've been,
I went in there somewhere too, I'm not sure, I assume it's already in the quiet zone.
I would put it
So,
under economic
yeah,
development.
those are, I didn't put them up here, cause I think we already have our marching orders on those, and so
Those are
I've
good
asked for
items.
council, like, gateway enhancement, Robert's working on them.
I mean, so, Robert and Skip have been very helpful, even just in some of the.
Where's
stuff we're
Robert
doing
with his-
very recently? But got some other ideas around gateway enhancement, but I think that's something that's such an easy touch that if we focus on it intentionally, can do so much for community enhancement in spirit.
You know what, what hasn't happened?
On gateway enhancement.
I
I've
had
asked-
a
I've
couple of
asked them to put a
designs that-
Proposal together to include in this budget.
I think one of the things is we talk about the gateway enhancement, but we've talked a lot about the cleaning up of areas and streets and this and that. You know, since City Year is not really involved anymore, we haven't had a clean up Columbia Day or anything in a long time with keep the Midlands beautiful, this and that. But, you know, as you ride around and you're seeing it in the gateways and the neighborhoods, you gotta figure out this sense of pride.
Keep the village beautiful, amount of pride. I mean, everyone. I mean, it's really again combining all our resources, working with Robert's team, and everyone else. It needs to be one massive cleanup, and then just consistent cleanup, and then beautification of those gateways as well. I mean,
We gotta get the property owners engaged as well. It's interesting to see how some businesses have just totally relied on the yellow shirts. They don't take an ounce of pride of cleaning up in front of their space, and then you got other people who've been doing it for 40 years who still do it every morning.
Yeah.
You should have, if you hadn't gotten it already, Missy, I can't remember if we just got it as our, draft before it went to council, but community development, code enforcement, solid waste are still doing the neighborhood sweeps, 2, per district over the next 6 months. So they have a schedule out now from April to November. It'd be one, every month in each of the districts, but
So if
that's
some-
still internal.
But, you know, that's different from what we're seeing
Dublin corridors.
in the streets. you know, it'd be great to take staff and just ride around and look and see. And some of it's, you know, coordinating with DOT and other places. But I mean, you know, coming down Trenton Road Extension the other day again, brand new school there, grass, you know, trash everywhere. You know, you just spent $20 million on a brand new school, and the front looks like, you know, nobody cares.
Yes, sir. So, yes, sir, we're piloting something right now. And so if it works, we'll try to see how we can expand upon it. But it's big effort with internal resources to do that.
But it's just an
Yeah, it's
example.
an
It's just one I saw. But, you know, riding down Two Notch was the other day. You know, we're just trash cans at the, you know, or pulling out of, if you're a family at Fort Jackson visiting your child and you take that child to Walmart and you pull out of there and there's 12 shopping carts piled up in front of Wendy's, another 10 across the street at Verizon, and then you look down and there's a trail of mini bottles and whatever else, trash everywhere. I mean, there's just, I mean, it's just bad. It looks bad.
Look forward to hearing Robert's report, but a lot of our work is going to be really getting all the same people in the room at one time. Randy's got Jacqueline working on some things.
Could you do that? Because I'm going to be meeting
Jackie
with
Williams.
neighborhood
Jackie
folks.
Williams.
Oh,
Jackie-
gotcha.
Jackie
Okay.
Williams. Because again, it's litter abatement and then it's
Right.
beautification.
And
Some things will be, yeah, no, she's like him. She's one of those master gardeners like Howard.
But you know, the challenge is the corridors and the interior of neighborhoods.
So let's talk about what we can do. I'd love to have one massive community-wide effort backed up with some recurring efforts around the city. So can't wait to
Yes, sir.
hear from Robert. A lot of these things, guys, if we come have a comprehensive plan, we'll find wonderful philanthropic partners. I mean, you look at some of the stuff Joe Blanchard does right in front of his business and what he and
But there's
Stuart
so
and some
many
others
people there, but we
do it
haven't
all in.
engaged, you know,
Yeah.
the Forever Forest, getting people to put more trees, plants, and getting sponsors to do it, because I think when people get that sense of pride, they're not gonna do it. You notice it in Charlotte, especially if you ride down South Boulevard or any of those corridors that were, you know, the warehouse and industrial, are now, the plantings that they're doing prohibit trash from being, like the medians have this special grass in it, stays high, it keeps the trash out of it, so it becomes, you know, keeps people from tearing it up.
All right. We'll look for Robert's report.
Yes, sir. We're at it. Oh, were there any others? I'm sorry, Mr. Bedore. Yeah, I think that's been discussed before. Okay, we have, one final budget workshop item, which is your fiscal year 2017-2018 audit report. Ms. Ellen Atkins is the CPA for Webster Rogers LLP. Thank you for joining us. And Jan, our Alonzo, our finance director, will give some opening comments, I think. That's what Jeff told me. I'm sorry. Talk to Jeff.
That's called
He said-
delegation.
So as many of you may or may not know,
Can you not learn like him, say no?
Hadn't rubbed off on him, I guess.
so Bud Addison had been our auditor for 12 plus years, well, it's longer than I've been here. And he left Webster Rogers in January. So there was a few items that weren't finished before he left. So Ellen and her team has had to pick up the pieces and get us to where we needed to be. So while she may not be able to answer your individual questions, we can certainly get those and get them answered for you. But she is going to do the presentation of the TAFR and the Uniform Guidance Report.
Didn't tell council to bring their cappers that we have. Sorry.
Jeff's got some extras, he said, if you guys didn't bring them, so he's.
Yeah.
I did, yeah, I didn't bring it.
Howard has his with him always.
Ta-da. It's great reading.
I didn't think about that. I'm
That would be the other book that.
The land use one. No,
Land use.
No, my child picked that up, and she said, "Mommy, you read this?" I was like, "How much?"
There's a lot of pictures in it, so there's a plus.
I am Ellen Adkins. I'm a partner with Webster Rogers, and I've been behind the scenes on the city's audit for since 2008. Is when I joined the firm, when my firm was acquired by Webster Rogers. So Bud and I've always worked together, but Bud's been the face you've always seen. And boy, are we going to miss him. But it was a good opportunity for him to go work for one of our clients, and we certainly just have to wish him well. What I just handed out to the council members is what's called the governance letter. This is communication from the audit firm to the council members. This is not the same as the big audit report. This is our communication to you that tells you significant points about the audit. And some of the things that are in here are, it points out what are the significant estimates that are within the financial statement. If there were any problems with management, if we had any problems in the audit, what were the audit adjustments? What were the unrecorded adjustments? Meaning things that we found that discussed with staff and we determined it was not material or for whatever reason did not need to be recorded. And then we also include the representation letters that management has provided. So to talk about some of those key elements, significant estimates. What happens is in a financial statement, you have cash transactions. Those are pretty hard and fast numbers. But then there's a number of things that are in your financial statements that are softer. For instance, one of the big adjustments that was made probably about 4 years ago was GASB 68, which was the recognition of your net pension liability. This was a change in the accounting standards that said, okay, it's not enough to just pay what the state says you need to pay for your employees. We need to know what the big obligation is. What's the total obligation for those people that are working for you today and in the future, and what that obligation is going to be to pay out their pensions. And that hit your books about 4 years ago, and it was a substantial number. This year, you got hit with another one. It's called the OPEB. That's the post-employment benefits. That's the health insurance for the retirees. And so it's a big estimate. And in this financial statement, you have about $110 million hit to your equity.
How much?
$110 million. It's only on the government-wide, thank goodness, it's not on your fund balance. And if you look in the financial statements, you'll see an obligation of $150 million for that. You're not gonna have to write a check tomorrow for that. And a lot of people look at that and think, oh my goodness, we've got $300 million in obligations.
So what do the new rules tell us as it relates to our OPEB liability? Do we still have an annual required contribution, or how does this work?
It's a different, obligation, because what the obligation that's recognized in your financial statements is the total obligation, but then you still, every year, are told this is the amount you have to pay for this year. So you pay a monthly amount, quarterly amount, and so forth, just like you do with the pensions. The idea is that the government, the state agencies that collect that money, the PBA, they do a calculation and say, in order to fund this obligation for this next year, you need to do X% of an employee's paycheck. It seems reasonable. And that's the check y'all write. It's what they tell you is the percentage. And there are limits as to how much that percentage can go up each year. There are limits as to who gets covered. There's a lot of rules about it. But when they take that and then extrapolate that to all the employees of the city and so forth, it's $150 million. So, but it's just an estimate. You're still paying the same, the approach is still the same as far as what you write a check for every year. It's the same approach as what you've always done. There's been no change in how you fund. It's just what's recognized in your financial statements.
I guess I'm trying to figure out, based on some of the changes that we are making, what was that? Yeah, I'm trying to get an idea. You know the question. You know the question. So. Okay. Okay. All right. we're trying to figure out exactly how much relief, if any. I mean, since we've shifted to defined contributions, and I mean, we've been there for a while, but continue to revamp our plan every few years. We've somewhat stayed ahead of the game. The last move, I guess, has significantly lowered our long-term liability.
Yes, but the last
Yes.
study took in effect, it was using our old health
Okay.
program. We were self-insured using Blue Cross. We'll learn a lot more as we do the next one at the end of this year, because although I say we're gonna learn a lot, I'm still not sure, because we're split in the middle of the year. We're gonna have 6 months of the state healthcare plan and 6 months of our old history. So that's one of the conversations we're having with
Sure.
the actuarial right now, is how that's going to work when we do this plan. And next year, when we'll have a full year, we'll have 18 months at that point. So when we talk about how is that going to change the liability, when we did the estimates, it was going to go down because our overall costs have decreased as well. But until we do the actual, I don't want to guarantee that's going
Sure.
down until the actuarial has done that study, and that'll be still 7 months.
It better go down. Okay, thank you.
And that's exactly why we try to tell you about this in this letter, to say,
Yes, ma'am.
that's a real soft number. You know, it says 150 million, it might be different than that. And when you read the disclosures, it says if there is a 1% increase in certain assumptions, what is the impact? So those are very soft numbers. It's gonna be big, we know that, but we don't know exactly what that number is. And so this is a best guess based on your actuaries' estimates and so forth, and that's where these estimates come in.
7 years ago, it was almost 2 times that. It's 230, 240 million, wasn't it? It was 230, 240 million, so, thank you. All right,
Sure.
Keep on.
But this letter, one of the points is to point out to you, what are the softer numbers, what are estimates in here? Like when you bill for water and sewer services, there's an estimate that you're not gonna get 100% of that. Same thing with your taxes. You're not gonna get 100%. And so staff makes an estimate, it makes some assumptions and estimates some of these numbers. And we look at how they approach it, and we say, yeah, that's reasonable. Same thing with the fixed asset lives. That significantly impacts how much depreciation you recognize each year. We look and say, does that seem reasonable? What the lives they put on those assets, does that seem reasonable? So any of these softer numbers in here, we are applying procedures, but we just want you to know those are softer numbers than the hard cash. How much cash do you have in the bank? One of the other things we talk about in this letter is audit adjustments. We're required to disclose to you if we made adjustments to the financial statements. And also, were there any adjustments that were identified that were not recorded? Unfortunately, this year, there were more adjustments. There was a timing thing with some staff changes on the city's behalf, that when we started the audit, there were some changes made to the financial statements, more than we normally would make. A good majority of those adjustments were identified by your staff, but they just didn't have it done before they gave us the trial balance. Happy to say that they posted all the adjustments that were identified, even if they were, you'll see if you read through these journal entries, you'll see that some that are, I would call trivial or not material, but your staff wanted to get it right. And so they wanted the adjustments made. So there were more adjustments in that line as well that are not, they were not, as auditors, we would not have had you make them, but that was something that they wanted to make. So there are no uncorrected misstatements, so we don't think there's anything in here that hasn't been fixed, and that's a good thing. But there were a lot more adjustments than normal. We, of course, had no issues with management. There were, before we got too deep into audit, one of the major discussion issues was GASB 75, which is the OPEB. That was a lot of discussion going back and forth with staff. And we do have attached to this the representation letters that management signed, or is in the process of signing. So you understand what they are telling us that they have given to us. So, but this letter is really a communication from us to you to let you know what happened in the audit. How did the audit play out? With regard to your financial statement, I know you've had them for a while because the financial statement was actually issued in January 22nd. And I know you've been provided a copy of it, so I'm not going to really dwell on it, but I do want to point out a couple things. If you do have the occasion, you want to sit down and read the financial statement, just to kind of give you an idea of what are some of the key things you might want to focus on. The city does issue a CAFR, a Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. Not every government does that. It's a huge commitment of time and resources. Your staff prepares these financial statements. There are a number of governments in South Carolina that do not, that the audit firm will prepare the financial statements for them. You've got outstanding staff as far as their skill set, so they are capable of preparing your financial statements. You should be commended for that. One of the big issues on the big parts of the financial statement of this package in pages 1 through 6 is a transmittal letter. Now, this is from city management. And it's a forward-looking discussion. It talks about what the city got planned, what are some of the initiatives going on. It's a very important, if someone was moving to Columbia, wanted to get an understanding of it and understood financials, that would be a meaningful letter. And so it's an important letter that city management drafts.
If you look at page 3 through 5, which I think has been written by, signed by the city manager and Jeff, it's a great place to get points for a neighborhood talk, or if you're talking to the Rotary Club, it's got some very good information, and I thought it was very well done.
It's our CAFR and the letter. I mean, that's really. I mean, any responsible public official anywhere in the country should routinely spend some time understanding the CAFR, and that's the one which you can. Oh yeah, it's a heck of a tool. So thank you for that.
Well,
Saying each year we need to start a little earlier because there's so much going on. We don't, if y'all ever think of things you think we need to really try to include in the letter, please let us know that. But the finance staff and Jeff and I look at it too, but city's doing a lot.
Good information.
right. I agree that that transmittal letter in the front that comes from city management is really informative about where the city's going. Talks a little bit about what's happened in recent, but it's really a forward-looking discussion. After our report, there's on pages 13 through either 22 or 32 is the management's discussion and analysis. And that is written generally by your finance staff. And it's their summary of your financial statements and tells what happened during the year. What were the key important issues that they thought were, what did they think was important in these financial statements? And so I think those two documents, the transmittal letter from city management and the management's discussion and analysis from finance, I think are really informative without having to dig into all the different schedules and all through the financial statement. If you really want to understand where the city is, has been, and where it's going, those are really important documents. Now, you hire our firm to come in and express an opinion on your financial statements. Your staff drafted the financial statements. We come in, we do a lot of procedures to look at your records, see how the records are being maintained, are the numbers supported, what are the estimates, and so forth. And then we opine on these financial statements. Y'all received a clean opinion. It's an unqualified opinion, which is the best you can do. The city should be commended for that. It's not all governments get that, so you should definitely be commended for that. It does have an emphasis paragraph that points out about the restatement of $110 million, which is in every government financial statement this year. So that was something but brings it to the reader's attention. There was a restatement. But in all, it just, again, the city should be commended for having the records to be able to have a clean opinion on your financials. I know that most governments ask the question, what's our fund balance? So we'll talk about the general fund balance is about $34 million at the end of that fiscal year, which is about a $4 million increase from the prior year. And that's just the general fund. And $21 million of that was unassigned. Okay. Not going to dwell on that because I know you've had access to these numbers for a while. And the other important page is page 102, which is your budget and actual presentation. Again, it's general fund. Your revenue was over budget, and one of the big areas was in grants. You actually had more grant money than you budgeted. And on your expenditures, you were actually under budget in most areas, which is unusual. So that's, again, you budgeted basically a zero budget, using I think about $3 million in fund balance, and you actually had a surplus of about $4 million. So you did great as far as that goes.
The number again?
Which one?
The last one.
Well, you budgeted a zero, and you got a $4 million increase into your fund balance, okay, on the general fund. Narrow that down. Also.
Slow down.
I
I can hear it churning right
I just
now.
wanted to make sure Mr. Palin heard that too, and it passed to the city manager on the way to Mr. Palin, and that none of it went that way.
Yes, well, I only focused on general fund.
Into
Chief is already finished. Chief is already. He's already.
oh, I know. Speakers don't work in that direction. He didn't hear you.
Well, it is important to understand that your fund balance does have certain restrictions on it. So even though you had 34 million, there's only 21 million of that's unassigned. So keep that in mind.
Yes, ma'am.
So y'all make commitments, and those have to be reflected.
Ellen, you're doing a
I'm
great
about,
job.
I'm about to fill out one of those forms right now.
The city has been challenged with a
Did you give
number
it
of.
to Teresa? You give it to Sam and Mo? A little form I filled out?
No, I forgot. I didn't know, I thought it had already made its way down. That's his sample form.
My first request. Please continue.
Okay.
I digress.
I have one other area I wanted to mention. The findings and material weaknesses and reportable conditions or significant deficiencies. Last year, the city was dealing with 7 different material weaknesses, non-compliance, significant deficiencies. 2017 was not a banner year for the city as far as having findings. I have to commend the staff because you have no findings this year. The fact that they addressed, when you get that letter, you will see what was addressed, where these things dealt with. And absolutely, staff did deal with the issues that were outstanding from 2017. And there were no new findings. So your staff needs to be commended for that.
Or Jan, or Jeff, can you provide us what y'all did? I think it'd be good for us to know that.
I think even last year, there was a small description of what we were doing and how during that
I think that'd be good for us to have that.
And one thing that's a challenge is the timing of the audit. When we do an audit, we look at a 12-month period that's already passed. And often we're 6 or 7 months into the subsequent year. So to get all those things fixed, you're dealing with a very short window. And but that is the issue with findings.
I got a question, and I'm not trying to raise a red flag. Of course, the government or city government have a liability or a responsibility to provide services for the residents that live in the city. Compared to other city our size, what is the acquisition cost per customer or per residence when it comes to Columbia or Charleston or whatever it is? I'm just curious.
I don't know that off the top of my head, but that'd be an interesting thing to look at.
And it would be. I mean, I think it's something to do with us.
You're talking about attracting people to come to the
Like,
area?
you know, how much money we spend per person or per resident.
That would be an interesting number to see, and also to see if you could gather
Business
that
is
from
all you
other.
look at, so, you know.
Yeah.
And I know we're not a business, but
Right,
it'll be interesting to see that number.
that would be. That would be.
Acquisition costs?
Acquisition cost per resident.
Not acquisition. We wanna know how much it costs to provide service per.
To keep them here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's acquisition cost to keep them here.
Well, that's two different things. Acquisition to me is attractive.
To bring them in.
Retention is a totally different issue.
Correct, right. Acquisition is to bring them in.
Right,
Charleston, for example, they bring 45 to 50 people per day.
right. I live in Somerville, so I see them every day,
Residents.
and the traffic is horrible.
No,
Yeah, I guess-
can't be that many.
That's what I
but
heard.
understand.
That's what I heard the other day.
Yeah, that's-
You talking county-wide?
Yeah, I think they're talking about the entire Charleston metropolitan area. It's
MSA.
not just,
Might
it's
be-
definitely
might
not
be-
the city.
MSA.
MSA.
Yeah.
All right.
And I think they're actually talking about the low country, all 3 counties. But it is a lot of people.
Go in
Fake
James
news.
Island.
And I've not heard a quoted dollar amount, how much it's costing to get those people to come there. So that would be interesting to know. That's really all I had. I wanted to thank the staff for their cooperation and their professionalism. I admit our firm was kind of behind the eight ball, but, Bud stayed as long as he could. He stayed actually past his point so that we could try to get this job finished, and that's his focus was getting the financial statement finished. I came in and finished the single audit. And so you will actually see that there are two different dates on the reports when you get the second set of reports. But staff was very cooperative and very professional about it, and I appreciate their efforts. And again, I want to congratulate the city for you made a lot of efforts in fixing those prior year findings, and also to continue to achieve a clean opinion every year is commendable.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So Ellen, you'll be doing our reports.
Well,
We gotta.
No, we
That was the
have
last
an
year.
RFP
Yeah.
now, yeah, is it, when, has the period ended for responses?
I didn't know if because I remember I thought we said last year this would be it, but I wasn't sure.
So it's already out. for
So-
responses.
This
Moving
is
forward,
online.
who should we direct questions to?
I want to ask either Jan or Jeff some questions.
Okay, let's do it.
Y'all wanna?
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And just one quick question. Is this going online?
It does.
It
once
is
we- yeah.
online.
Is it already up there?
Out there? It's a good document.
Oh, you mean the document?
Yeah, yeah. 'Cause, I always tell folks, come down to City Hall because we're doing the budget. We're talking about spending your money. They don't show.
The CAFR is online. The other report will be online in the next couple of days. That's the smaller report, and that'll be on all the federal office.
Jeff, we need to get the letter.
It's already online too.
I had a list of questions, but I'm not gonna ask them all. I'll get with you privately, but two or three things I would like to ask, for the edification of the council and the public that might be watching.
You're so thoughtful.
That's right. If you look on page 127, there is a chart, page 127. In the middle of page 127, there's a chart, and it deals with county services fund. And if you look from 2015 through present year, there's been a negative balance in the county services fund. Is the county services fund the fund that we use to fund the fire department?
We fund the fire department and we fund half of 911.
Okay. So for the last 4 years, we've had a negative balance in that fund. Does that mean that the city residents are paying more than their fair share for 911?
That's exactly what it's made.
Well, I just wanted to hear, if I was interpreting this thing right, I don't know how to read these things too good, but.
You know how to read it.
So, over the last few years, it's about $10 million if you add it all up.
This balance is, so thank you, cumulative. At the end of 18, it was about $3 million.
Okay, so it's cumulative, it's not each year.
No.
So, the county really owes us about $3 million. We're spending on the fire and the 911, $3 million than the city should be spending.
Agreed.
And the city residents are maybe
county
getting
should
double
be
taxed for that.
Well, I wouldn't say that there's a double tax for that, but
But we're owed
we
the
are,
money, you're
we are
correct.
owed the
Yeah,
money.
we're owed the money.
And Howard, if you recall from years of every year we've had that discussion with fire contract, that's always been one of the sore spots and the problems, and, we got those folks digging through it, but yet we asked for one document, we can't get it. This is why hopefully we're having a new day with some new council members, and
Well, I think that
To
number
move
is
forward.
something the new council members need to understand.
they do need to understand it, we need to be whole on it.
On my next illustration is on page 132. If you turn to page 132, and the back part of this CAFR is very interesting for this statistical stuff. And it's got all sorts of good little things in it. 132, it lists the principal property taxpayers in the city. And the number 2 taxpayer by this ranking in 2018 was Providence Hospital. So Providence Hospital is a tax-paying hospital for the city of Columbia. Is that correct?
According to Richland County, it is.
And they are the number 2 taxpayer for the city of Columbia as far as property tax.
According to Richland County,
And they provide hospital services just like all the other hospitals in.
to the best of my knowledge.
Is this cross-examination?
It looks like it.
I just wanted to get it on the record here, what we're
I see
talking
that.
about.
I mean, they have been for years.
And-
That's always been the argument of why we need to move forward on some other.
And
So let's be clear, though, on Providence, they have only begun paying property taxes in the last, I think it's 2 years, maybe 3 years. They were a tax exempt, they were a nonprofit, and then they were purchased by a for-profit company. So they just began paying taxes in the last 3 years.
That's a good piece of.
And,
Good
for
for
my
us.
last illustration, if you'll turn to page 145, which is operating indicators on function and program. I will skip over the top of it that talks about public safety, and I'll run down to the middle of the page where it talks about potholes. So if you see in 2009, we filled 2,757 potholes. And last year, we only filled 843 potholes. What happened to our pothole maintenance program?
Maybe we have less, maybe we have less potholes. We might have
Got them
less-
all filled up
Yeah,
before?
we might have less potholes.
Progress, Holly.
I don't even want to start this conversation because my blood pressure's going to go up when I ride through the other day and I watch a neighborhood whose street was not even close to how bad my street is get fully paved, and they came and patched. Now this is the state, not the city, but it just shows, there's a big problem.
These charts in the back are very interesting, and I'd recommend all of you read that. And I'll get with Jan and ask her more specific questions later on.
Yeah, we can set up, we did the same thing with you last year. It's just
Okay.
that overall, we'll be happy to do that again.
Good stuff.
And yeah, anybody.
That's good. I like it.
Potholes,
I didn't know we had a pothole fixing.
Yeah, no, I like 142 are the demographic information. We can probably, Jeff, we can probably talk about this later. I was just wondering, on 142, the demographic information, where it looks like, it shows the increase in our population and then the kind of a slight increase in personal income, and I'm just wondering, do we have any assessment as to whether or not that the personal income growth is equal to like the population growth? It just seems like the personal income growth seems to be slow.
Those all come from
The census,
Yeah, that's nothing that we gather.
Yeah, oh, I know, I just didn't know if we knew,
Non-tax
kind of,
paying,
us in
non-tax
relation to
paying,
other cities, because people always talk about the growth, I'm just wondering.
We don't-
Non-tax paying, taxpayers, non-tax paying.
That's an interesting chart, too.
Yeah.
At 43,
I just want to know, we got to be on the
7,
same page.
8, 9.
Yeah, we can look at that, because I want to show y'all some of the charts that I got from Prosperity Now as well, and kind of, maybe, just so we can have a good understanding as to where we are with
You know,
personal, family.
to follow,
I was gonna say, so tell us what you're looking for so we can pull it, because we only pull what we need.
and,
So let
and
us know what you want.
I'll send you the charts I've been looking at, and then y'all can let me know.
you know, know, what's weird about that statistics is the unemployment rate is lower by a whole percentage, but your income, average income is only increased by 500 or per capita personal income. It doesn't make sense. You know, doesn't make
That's why I was
sense.
just wondering if it was growing at the right level. Interesting is.
Not as interesting as the next page.
It may not seem like it, y'all, but the CAFR is probably some of the most interesting and exciting reading. It really is.
It really is.
I mean,
Well, that's why I think it's great we do it.
Oh, yeah.
And I think any community does a disservice, but
Periodically confirm suspicions. It will confound you and confuse you sometimes on some things you thought to be the case, but it's just good data. And our staff does do a fantastic job pulling it all together. But it helps you understand the city probably more than any other document we have.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jan.
I need to add a contractual item.
Which one, personnel?
Just pick one.
Would you like to move upstairs after?
Sure, yes, yes.
I'd like to make a motion that we go into executive session, discussion of negotiations, instance of proposed contractual arrangements pursuant to 30-4-70A2 Capital City Stadium wayfinding MOU, Magic Ice Lake, Little Lake Catherine Convention Center study, water and sewer bond issuance. Receipt of legal advice related to matters covered by attorney-client privilege pursuant to 30-4-70A2 business license fees, Rural Richland Sewer. Discussions matters related to proposed location of expansion of services to GERD location or expansion of industries or other businesses pursuant to 30-4-8 Stanley Park. Receipt of legal advice related to pending or threatened potential claims pursuant to 30-4-70A2 Jerome Francis versus City of Columbia, Ray Klepper Boating Center versus the city, and for personnel matters pursuant to 30-4-70A2. Just personnel. Did we cover your thing?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
All right, so second,
Second.
discussion. Seeing none, for the previous question, clerk call the roll.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.